Hi everyone, welcome to my channel. It's been a couple of months since I've made any videos at all, or even really interacted online, and it's for a very good reason. It was almost like God was in control to show me another layer of the sacred secretion and a very impactful lesson experience, which has taken a protracted amount of time, I must say. And I'm going to explain it through the use of this whiteboard because it is a holistic expression that I'm trying to get across. And so I haven't talked about my personal life much in these videos at all because there's a lot that is so layered. It's almost like difficult to find the end in the beginning sometimes. So I'm just going to kind of jump in to it midstream with the theme of something that I think will be useful to practitioners of this practice of becoming the Jesus Christ, the Iesa Christ within, through following the monthly sacred secretion. And where is it all leading? Like, what is the point of this cyclical practice as we build up energy in our bodies? What are we meant to do with this creative life force energy? And what are the dangers of not knowing what to do with it? And what are the dangers of turning yourself into an energy magnet and then having a lesson in the equal opposite polarity to guide you on your course, but through it being the negative opposite polarity, in the moment of the happening of the lesson, it can feel very, very difficult. So I'm going to talk about the energetics of this and use my personal life of recent months as the experience, as the demonstration. So anyway, enough introductions. I released my online course on July the 31st. And within 3 minutes of releasing the online course, the internet went off, which was just fabulous, but it was online. And prior to that date, I had been obviously in the creation phase of creating an online course, and I felt like I was under a lot of adversary energy because I was trying to create an audio visual course in the jungle, and the jungle is actually really, really, really noisy. Today I'm having a bit of a quiet day, but you can still always hear a rooster and a cricket as the background noise. So I had all of this energy going on. It was building up inside of me to levels of frustration that I have not experienced before, because not only did we have the noises of the jungle, there was construction, there was chainsaws, there was monsoon, rain, everything that I didn't want to have in my now life was there. But I powered through and I got there and I did the course. But in that time of all of that stress, I actually slipped over on the path in the rain, and I injured my wrist quite badly, which meant that I could not drive my motorbike, which meant that I was doing a lot of walking, which was great. It was very great for me to do all this walking. And in that time, I really began to contemplate the meaning of Iesa in terms of an acronym. The acronym being the intention, the emotion, the spirit, and the action. And there's a video on my channel quite a few years ago, I made it now, talking about telekinesis and me trying to reverse engineer the telekinesis effect through this kind of unification of my intention and my emotion and my vibration, which was my action of spoken word, and you know, the emotional experience of gratitude for another brought about this telekinetic experience. And so during my walking with my injured wrist and going up and down to the supermarket, I began to really kind of, you know, inspect this as these 4 aspects of the word name Iesa. And that then led me to a true visceral experience, which I'm going to explain now, which was all about this one, the power of emotion. And this, I guess, you know, if I'm going to just contextualize this event or series of events, and in terms of what are we doing when we're doing the practice of the sacred secretion to become the MAGI priest adept of the Temple of Iesa that MacDari talks about in his works, we have to go through certain levels of different types of trainings. And it's self-mastery, right? So that's what this lesson is about. This teaching is about the power of emotion. And so the very next day, on August the 1st, my friend arrives, call her friend number 1. She arrives and to have a holiday here, and I did say that she could stay with me, but it was really, I mean, as you can see with my online course happening there, it wasn't really the most convenient time for me to have a visitor. So I, you know, thought, okay, I can have a bit of time off. Not that I really wanted to, because I was building up momentum, but it couldn't be helped because my friend did a bit of a surprise visit on me. So, and by the way, she and I have talked about this whole experience together as, you know, what it all means. So it's not like I'm, you know, betraying anyone's trust by sharing this story, just to let you know. So this is my friend, and she arrives with a lot of red energy, which is a lot of anger and unresolved trauma. You know, she arrived to stay with me, and here's me in my house. And because I've been living like a recluse for at least 2 years, I barely see anyone, barely anyone comes to my house. So I feel like I've never had to put up much of a protective barrier around myself. And I've always had personal issues with saying no to people, and also just having the attitude of needing to protect myself. I've always been a bit blasé with that kind of putting up a fence around myself at all times. So you could say that my boundary lines have always been a little bit wishy-washy with, you know, my cultural raising, which was just be the nice good girl and say yes to everyone. You know, all of that stuff, that conditioning, it does set us up for these experiences later down the track, so we can have the lessons and the learning, so we can actually modify our spiritual process. So anyway, friend number 1 arrives with all of her anger, and it begins to kind of penetrate into my energy field, right? And because I am really quite good at absorbing other people's emotions and then transforming them, I was able to transform her emotion through me for a certain period of time. But because I just allowed and allowed and allowed, this kind of enabled her to keep projecting until I couldn't handle this vibration. And I did end up exploding at her, and then basically saying, you know, you can't behave like that in my house. Because keeping in mind also, like, where I live on this island, it is a very amplified energy island. There's a lot of spiritual practices happening here all of the time. And then the land I live on is an even more amplified version of that. So when, you know, another person comes into an amplifier, all of their stuff got amplified. And I know this through personal experience because it's been happening to me as I've been living in this land. Whatever emotion I feel at the time, I feel it more strongly than I normally would. So I've had to work on my own emotions in this way. So that was happening. Then 1 week later, so let's call it around August the 7th, a second person arrived. And he was equally projecty. I'm going to draw me here now in red because I became influenced. This is all about being emotionally influenced by another. So person number 2 arrived, and also he had a very strong energy field, and he decided to try to influence my energy field with his. And, you know, my little border that was already pretty weak got penetrated with someone else's ideas. I'll go into all the details of that in another video, and also in my last book that I'm still finishing. But it was really manipulative, I would say. It was a manipulative energy, and I didn't like it. But I still allowed it. And I have this, you know, as I've said, bit of an issue with allowing other people's realities to become more important than my own. Along with him arriving, so he's person 2, there was a person 3 arrive. She wasn't as invadey as the other 2 people, but there was a third person arrive. And so all of that took 3 weeks. And in that time, I felt less like myself and more like others, you could say. Then after 3 weeks, everybody left, and I was left to my 23rd cycle of raising the sacred secretion within, when the moon went into Libra in the sidereal calendar. And to be honest, I didn't have much of my own energy left to be doing that practice in a safe way, so I took a rest. I took a rest for that one, because that's what we have to do, because you can't raise strong energy in your body if you've been depleted, which I was, unfortunately. But these things happen, right? Because it's all a big lesson. At least that's how I need to reframe it, so I'm not still speaking from the emotional reaction space, which I have been in, which I've had to process and make sense of it all, so I can start speaking about it, and hopefully it will help other people. So then what happened? So that was 1 week. That was 3 weeks. For the next 2 weeks, because I'm such a nice person and I always say yes, still not learned that lesson at this point. A very old friend of mine calls me up and says that her little brother is stuck in Indonesia with an injury and he needs help. How can I refuse that? I'm a healer. So he comes to my house, and he can't really walk that well. So he's literally in my space, where the space that I've given up for the last 3 weeks, the space that I've given up for this time now is really where I work from. It's like my office. So I didn't really have a space to work from, and I had not been able to do any work. And then I had a person number 4, and he was very, very nice. I'd never met him before. We got on very well. But he had a lot of suppressed emotion, which I would say was more on the depression side. And because I was already bit of this. Now it was a bit of that. And I wasn't doing my own work anymore because I just felt so scattered. And this wasn't really happening very well. That's called the energy field, broken apart. And then, you know, he didn't project it on me like the other people did with intentions, but because I'd become so empathic, I could still feel it, and I could feel sadness, and I could feel depression. And the first couple of days it was fun with him, and then after a while I was like, why do I feel depressed? Can you catch depression? And we talked about it as well with him and his, you know, feelings and everything very openly. So it just became this very interesting experience where on one end of the scale I was surrounded by manic energy, and the other end of the scale was depression. And I became lost in the sea of it in my own house, which was very ironic because, you know, when you're a practitioner, even if you work from a home clinic, the person always leaves. You do the healing and they leave, and then you reset yourself. In this period of time, the lines got so blurry between what was theirs and mine, and my space and their space, and they didn't leave, quite literally, that everything became very blurry for me. And yeah, so there's lots of details around that. But that's just basically the context and the setup. Yeah, the details don't really matter other than for just providing a drama story, but this is not about a drama story. So after person 4 left, oh yeah, that's where I met the 4-meter python in my Garden of Eden. We have a python. And it was on my path, and I walked past it, and then I went back, and then I videoed it, and I got it really close. And I introduced myself to the python. It's very beautiful. I've made a little video on that. Anyway, I'm more afraid of other people than I am of giant snakes, ironically. I'm not afraid of people. So after all of that, I had to go to Phuket to stay with person number 1 because of stuff I had to do with my visa. And you would probably ask, why would you go stay with someone that caused you so much imbalances? But, you know, this person I've known for a very long time. We're very dear friends, and, you know, this is just what we do for each other as friends. She teaches me something, I teach her something. Hopefully we both grow together. But also in this time, this is when she bought me a present, and it is called Revitalis, and I called it Cleopatra's milk. And I think without this internal medicine, my nerve centers would not have been able to handle all of this, because believe me, it was a very loud vibration. I'm really underplaying how it affected me, to be honest. So anyway, I go over to Phuket because I want some of this. I want to bring some back to my house. So I meet the alchemist who makes it. And I also meet some very, very beautiful people, including person number 2 is there, her boyfriend, lots of friends. I get taken to a beautiful clinic and meet some people. So, you know, it was beautiful, and it was great to get out of Bali, because I've been here on Bali for 3.5 years without leaving. Anyway, when I got back to Bali, I felt dead. I felt like my personality had been removed. On the physical sense, because of this stuff, my physical body was actually getting stronger, but my mental, emotional life had hit the rocks. And I literally felt like my identity was lost, because I had been influenced by this person, by this person. This person did some really weird stuff, actually. There'll be another video. And this person, and then who was I at the end of it all? I don't know, because I pretty much lost my creativity. All of these videos I wanted to make, I've got such a backlog of videos I want to make, couldn't do it. I couldn't even think. And I didn't want to write, I didn't want to do anything, and I felt pretty lost. But since then I've found the way to rescue myself and put it all into context, which is actually, it's actually blowing my mind in a very beautiful way. On the way to Phuket, I had a book that I was reading called Psychic Defense by a person called Dion. And this was a very interesting book because Dion was talking about the fact that the Celtic race, aside from children, the Celtic race is the most empathic and or psychically afflicted race of people, which made a whole lot of sense because, you know, some people don't get affected by any of this stuff ever, but I seem to get affected by it like you would not believe. The story of my life is, this is just very superficial level. So I was reading that, and that made a lot of sense. And then my friend, person one, had given me a book that person two had borrowed out of the Bali library and taken to Phuket. So she gave it back to me, and I began reading that. And it was by a man called Bob Frissel. I can't remember the title of it. Another friend's got it now. It's going around the friend group. But this was all about Thoth and Drunvalo Melchizedek and the Flower of Life, and basically Egyptian teachings, mystery school stuff, and of course the Merkava, which is the teaching of the chariot, which is the sacred secretion, which comes with a lot of perils and dangers, which is why the Kabbalists would not teach it unless you were already initiated to a certain level where you could handle all of the stuff that it brought about holistically and energetically. So I started reading that, and literally by reading this book, I was like, oh, I've done that. Oh yeah, that relates to my life. Oh, that relates to my past life. Oh, that relates to my Egyptian memories. It all started to like coalesce, like all of this teaching started to coagulate into like something that was making sense. So I continued reading this. I brought it back to Bali, and then I started rereading a book called Initiation by Elizabeth Haich that was written or published in 1953. And I'd actually begun reading this book way back when I was like 27. And I only got halfway. Stuff happened in life to stop me halfway. And this book is about this woman, this Elizabeth Haich woman. She's from Hungary, and she, in her life story, practicing yoga, being a yogi, all of that, she started to remember her past life memories, and she remembered one life in particular, where she was initiated as a priestess in the Great Pyramid. And the book is really about her her initiation teachings and her fall from her height, her fall from grace, her fall from consciousness, and basically her now life and all of her past lives happened because she actually fell from her initial priestess training way back all those thousands of years ago. I'll get way more into this. I just want to do the overview. And so then, reading 4 books at once is useful. I looked back into the first MacDari book of the wisdom held in the Bible and the pyramid. And I began to see how all of this stuff started connecting together into the teaching of this particular superpower of becoming the Iesa within. Because MacDari in his work, he talks about the temple of Iesa being built in Egypt, the Great Pyramid, and all of the set of pyramids were built by the Irish MAGI priests. And there were actually 4 of them. And they represented the body, the human body lying, if we're lying down, this could be kind of like the layout of the Solomon's temple. The temple of Iesa is the human body, because Iesa means the seed, essence, spirit, the 3 treasures of Taoism. Anyway, we know all this if you've watched my videos. And so MacDari's basically written his book in 1923 showing that this setup at Iesa is the training place of the priesthood. And Elizabeth Haich, in her work, is telling the stages of the initiation and what her training was to do this, which she did in the sarcophagus in the Great Pyramid, whichever one it is. I have to look up the pictures. So that really started tying together, and then also through this re-inspection, I began to find some curiosities that linked all of this together for me as a complete teaching, which related to my past life and my fall. As Elizabeth describes in her book, how she fell from a great height. And I remember my past lives and the people I fell with. I began to see the great holistic training of the temple of Iesa and the Irish Magi priesthood. So I'm going to leave that first part 1 there. And in part 2, I'm going to go into a bit of a summarization of what it was that she fell from, how she fell, what it did to her nerve centers, which we have to be careful with in our physical bodies while we're doing this amplification process. Otherwise we can injure ourselves on a physical level. And I'm going to relate her fall to what I remember about my fall and how it all relates to pyramids and energetic influence of the other person. So stay tuned for part 2.